It was supposed to be the opportunity of a lifetime. Two confident Americans landing in London with impressive resumes, Ivy League degrees, and years of corporate experience behind them. They had conquered New York boardrooms, negotiated six-figure contracts in Chicago, and led teams in fast-paced Silicon Valley startups. So when they secured prestigious positions at a respected firm in London, they assumed it would be simple. After all, how different could it be? English is English, right? But what happened next would not only cost them their jobs, it would expose one of the biggest cultural differences between Americans working in the UK and British office culture. And by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why Americans sometimes struggle in UK jobs without even realizing it. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. When Jake and Melissa arrived in London, they were energized. The company they joined was a historic financial consulting firm based near Canary Wharf. It wasn't flashy, but it had a powerful reputation. In the United States, Jake had built his career by being outspoken, bold, and direct. He believed leadership meant challenging ideas openly. Melissa, equally confident, believed that innovation came from questioning authority. In American corporate culture, speaking up, even to your boss, is often seen as initiative. But British office hierarchy operates very differently. During their first week, subtle signals were everywhere. Meetings were structured, formal, and calm. People waited their turn. Senior managers were addressed respectfully. Decisions moved slowly through layers of approval. Jake found it frustrating. In one meeting, when a senior director outlined a long-term strategy, Jake interrupted midway. "Why don't we just cut that timeline in half?" he suggested casually. In a US boardroom, this might have sparked energetic debate. In this room, something shifted. There was silence. Not hostile, not loud, just quiet. A few colleagues avoided eye contact. The director nodded politely and said, "That's an interesting perspective." But in British workplace language, interesting didn't mean impressive. This is where everything started to go wrong. Over the next few weeks, Jake and Melissa continued behaving exactly as they had back home. They scheduled meetings directly with senior executives without informing their immediate managers. They openly disagreed in group discussions. They joked casually with department heads. None of it felt disrespectful to them. In fact, they believed they were contributing energy and leadership. But in the context of UK workplace culture, hierarchy isn't just about ego, it's about structure, order, and respect for the chain of command. Colleagues began to whisper. Emails became more formal. Invitations to after-work drinks slowly stopped coming. Yet no one confronted them directly. That's another cultural difference. UK versus US professionals often misunderstand. In many British workplaces, confrontation is subtle. Disapproval is implied, not declared. Americans working in the UK sometimes misread politeness as approval. Then came the turning point. During a quarterly strategy presentation, Melissa publicly challenged her department head's financial forecast. She projected her own slides onto the screen and explained why she believed his assumptions were outdated. In an American firm, this might have been seen as initiative. In this British office hierarchy, it was viewed as undermining authority. The room was tense. Her manager thanked her calmly and suggested they discuss further offline. Again, calm words, calm tone, but behind that composure was a decision forming. The next morning, Jake received a formal email requesting a performance alignment discussion. Melissa received the same. Neither panicked. In the US, performance discussions are common and often constructive. But when they entered the HR office and saw both their manager and a senior partner seated formally at the table, reality hit. They were told their integration into company culture had not met expectations. They were described as disruptive to established reporting structures. The phrase that stunned them most? A consistent disregard for British office hierarchy. Jake tried to defend himself. "We were just trying to improve efficiency," he argued. Melissa added, "We thought leadership valued initiative." The senior partner nodded politely. "Initiative is valued," he replied. "But it must respect the framework within which we operate." And just like that, their contracts were terminated. For Jake and Melissa, it felt unfair. They hadn't insulted anyone. They hadn't missed deadlines. Their performance metrics were strong. But in the UK workplace culture, how you operate can matter just as much as what you produce. Respecting hierarchy in British offices isn't optional. It's foundational. The story spread quietly through the firm. Some colleagues felt sympathy. Others felt it was inevitable. They skipped levels. One employee whispered, "You just don't do that here." When Americans working in the UK struggle, it's often not because of skill. It's because of assumptions. In many U.S. companies, flattening hierarchy is encouraged. First names are standard. Debate is public. In contrast, British office hierarchy tends to emphasize tradition, gradual progression, and deference to seniority. Jake later admitted something important. No one ever told us directly that we were crossing a line. But that was precisely the point. In British workplace culture, the line is understood, not announced. Back in the United States, months later, both reflected deeply on the experience. Melissa realized that cultural intelligence matters as much as professional competence. Jake began researching expat mistakes in the UK and found story after story similar to theirs. Highly capable Americans, confused by subtle signals, unintentionally challenging structures that had existed for decades. But here's the bigger question. Was the company too rigid? Or were Jake and Melissa too unaware? Some argue that innovation requires challenging hierarchy. Others believe respect must come first. Cultural differences UK versus US workplaces reveal that neither approach is inherently wrong. They're simply different systems shaped by history. British institutions often trace their structures back centuries. Formality evolved for stability. American corporate culture, influenced by entrepreneurship and rapid economic expansion, evolved toward boldness and speed. Neither Jake nor Melissa expected to be examples of why Americans struggle in UK jobs. Yet their story became a lesson for countless expats considering overseas careers. When you enter another country's professional ecosystem, adaptation isn't weakness, it's strategy. The emotional fallout lingered. For weeks after their termination, both wrestled with embarrassment. Friends back home initially reacted with disbelief. "You got fired for speaking up?" one asked. But once they explained the nuances of British office hierarchy, the conversation shifted. Melissa eventually returned to London for a new opportunity, this time prepared. She observed more, spoke less initially, built alliances within her reporting line, and when she offered ideas, she framed them as suggestions within established channels. The result? She thrived. Jake chose a different path. He remained in the US but began consulting companies on cross-cultural training, helping Americans working in the UK avoid the same mistakes. What once felt like a professional failure became expertise. So what can we learn from this? First, confidence doesn't automatically translate across borders. Second, politeness doesn't equal approval. And third, respecting British office hierarchy isn't about submission, it's about understanding context. But the debate remains. Should companies modernize rigid structures to encourage global talent? Or should expats fully adapt to local norms? Because here's the reality. In an increasingly global workforce, cultural friction is inevitable. The question isn't whether differences exist, it's whether we recognize them before consequences arrive. If you're considering working abroad, especially in the UK, remember this story. Americans working in the UK often assume shared language equals shared culture. But workplace expectations run deeper than vocabulary. They're built on values, history, and unspoken codes. And sometimes, ignoring those codes can cost you everything. Now I want to hear from you. Was this unfair treatment? Or should Jake and Melissa have respected British hierarchy from day one? Let me know in the comments. If you found this story insightful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more cross-cultural workplace stories, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what we uncover next. Because the next story might surprise you even more. After her second chance in London, Melissa noticed something fascinating. Once she mastered the rhythm of UK workplace culture, her American boldness became an asset rather than a liability. Timing was everything. Instead of interrupting, she scheduled structured feedback sessions. Instead of challenging publicly, she built consensus privately. Within 2 years, she was promoted. Not because she changed who she was, but because she learned when and how to present it. Jake, meanwhile, was invited back to London as a guest speaker on cultural differences UK versus US corporate environments. Standing in a conference room not far from where he'd once been dismissed, he shared his story openly. This time, the room wasn't silent with tension. It was engaged with understanding.